Want to start today with something that takes a little bit of courage to say out loud. It's one of those things you've probably seen on TikTok or Insta. The things I'd say to you if I wasn't worried about hurting your feelings. Sometimes the thing that is making a child anxious is not school, it's not their friends or their workload or the state of the world, although all of these things contribute. Sometimes, and I say this with every ounce of compassion I have, sometimes the thing that's making a child anxious is us, their parents. Not because we're bad parents, not because we don't love them, but because anxiety is one of the most contagious things there is. It moves through families like weather. It gets into the air and children breathe it in before anyone has said a single word. And the hardest part, most of the time, is we have absolutely no idea we're doing it. Today I want to talk to you about what happens when a parent's own unhealed anxiety shows up in their child. Not to blame, not to shame, that's not what we do here at The Resilient Kid. But because the most loving thing I can do for you and the children that you're raising is to tell you the truth about what the research shows and what it looks like when a parent decides to do something about it. This episode is for every parent who's ever sat across from me and said, with tears in their eyes and shock in their voice, I think it's me. I think I gave this to them. It happens more than and it's never too late to do something about it. I'm Ashley Costello. This is the Resilient Kid podcast. I want to tell you about a mum, let's call her Claire. Claire came to us because her daughter, Ellie, 9 years old, who was bright, imaginative, funny, had started refusing to go to school. Now, I use the word refusing because that's what schools call it. Anybody who's been in this situation, and speaking from Ellie and all those kids' point of view, they can't get into school. They literally can't. Let's carry on. It's not dramatic at first. Might be a stomach ache on a Monday morning, tears at the school gate, not wanting to leave, mum. A growing list of worries that seem to multiply at night time. What if I get something wrong? What if nobody sits with me at lunch? What if something happens while I'm there? What if? Claire, mum, had done everything right. She'd listened, she'd validated, she'd spoken to the teacher, she'd read some books, she'd tried breathing exercises. She loved Ellie with everything she had, and she was exhausted, frightened, and lost. When Claire came to see us, she sat down and said, I don't understand where this has come from. She's always been a really happy child. I asked her gently, how do you feel on a Monday morning? She was surprised at that and she laughed. Honestly, awful. I've hated Mondays my whole life. Work stress, the week starting. I always feel like something bad's going to happen. And I said, and when Ellie comes down for breakfast on a Monday, what does she find? Silence. She finds me tense, quiet, already in my head. She didn't say anything else for a moment, but then very quietly came a oh. That oh, I've heard hundreds of times over the years. It's the sound of something clicking into place. It's not the sound of blame, it's the sound of recognition, and it is, in my experience, the beginning of everything, where everything changes. Because here's what's been happening in Claire and Ellie's home entirely without anyone's awareness or intention. And let's be clear, definitely no intention behind it. Every Sunday evening, Claire's own anxiety, old, deep-rooted, probably from her own school days of Sunday nights, where the week begins to creep in, as an old, deep-rooted, connected to her own childhood experiences of feeling unsafe, would begin to rise. She would go quiet, her body would tighten. She'd move through the house in a particular way, checking things, sighing, not quite present, already thinking about the week ahead. Ellie, who loved her mum, and was so tuned in to her mum's emotional state in the ways that children often are, would pick this up. Not consciously, not in words, not in the way her mum's energy changed, in the quality of the silence, in the tightness in Claire's shoulders when she hugged her goodnight. And Ellie's nervous system, which had learned over 9 years to read her mum's state of mind as a signal, because that's what children's nervous systems are designed to do. They respond. Is something wrong? Is something bad coming? Be alert. By Monday mornings, Ellie would wake up already activated, already scanning for that threat, the fight, flight, freeze and fawn, totally on high alert. Already asking the questions that anxiety asks. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't cope? What if I'm not safe? My safe place is with my mum. Claire had not given Ellie her anxiety on purpose. She'd not even known it was given at all, but the transmission had been happening every week in the quiet language of the nervous system for years. So let's have a look at the research on why this happens. What happened between Claire and Ellie is not unusual. In fact, is one of the most well-documented phenomena in developmental psychology. And understanding the science behind it, really understanding, is the first step in changing it. I want you to imagine you're scared of bees and you're at a picnic with the family and a bee approaches. You hear it before you see it, so you're already looking. You're already on high alert. Where is it? Where is it? And then you start to look around. You then see it and you start to flap, don't you? And you're jump up, you're making noises, whether you're screaming, whether you are saying, be careful. However that reacts, we've seen it, we've all seen it if we haven't done it ourselves. And you have got a small person watching this, knowing now bees are not safe. That's anxiety works. It just spreads very easily like that. Just like us being scared of bees, that reaction, they see, they know that's how they react. They know they need to be scared of bees. So let's start with co-regulation. We've talked previously about Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, the idea that our nervous systems are constantly recording and reading cues of safety and danger in the environment. What I want to add today is this. For young children especially, the most powerful cue in an environment is not sight or sound or a situation. It is the nervous system of their primary caregiver. Research by Alan. Now, I'm going to say sure, but that might not be right. But it's Alan, 2 L's, and Schore. We'll put his name in the show notes as usual. One of the world's leading neurobiologists of emotional development shows that in early years of life, a child's nervous system literally co-regulates with their parents. The parent's calm is the child's calm. The parent's anxiety, same. Child's anxiety. It's not a metaphor, this is neuroscience. The attunement between a parent and a child is so deep, so finely calibrated, that a child can detect a shift in their parent's emotional state before that parent has said a single word or changed a single behaviour. Now, when I used to work in nurseries in Abu Dhabi, and I was the lead in education there, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. Shout out to Jane and Miss Annie. We just adored the nurseries. And in the baby room, if a baby was crying, I would say, pick them up, put them on your chest and breathe deeply. Start to hum, and you would see the baby calm down with a matter of seconds. This is that in practice. What we're talking about here is exactly that in practice. They will attune very quickly to our emotional regulation system, our nervous system. Now, Shaw calls this right brain to right brain communication. It happens below the level of conscious awareness. It is the reason a baby calms when held and escalates when it's held by an anxious person. It does not stop at babyhood. It continues through childhood, through adolescence. It is always happening. This is why Claire's Sunday evening anxiety was landing in Ellie's body every single week. There's lots of research on anxious parenting, and I want to be very careful here because this is an area where it's very easy to tip from information into blame, and that's not what we're doing here. So what I would suggest is don't just randomly Google anxious parenting. You know my thoughts. There is no such thing as a parenting expert. I am here to give you help, to give you advice. I look at the research and I will always say, you know your child best. You are the expert with your child. So let's have a look at some. There is some significant work by Professor Lynn Murray at the University of Reading. Shows that parental anxiety is one of the strongest predictors of childhood anxiety. Not because, and let me be clear, anxious parents are bad parents. They are often extraordinarily attentive, loving, thoughtful parents, but anxiety by nature changes behaviour in ways that, entirely unintentional, communicate danger to a child. An anxious parent might over-reassure, rush to soothe every worry, which inadvertently signals that worry was worth worrying about. They might overprotect. You've heard about the helicopter parenting, steering their child away from challenge, which deprives them of the experience of coping and to build up their own resilience. They may model avoidance, staying away from things that feel threatening, teaching a child that threat avoidance is appropriate response to anxiety. None of this is conscious, none of this is intentional. All of it completely understandable, and all of it can be changed. I remember having a young lad. He was probably about 10 as a client. Now, we were very lucky that his school had a wood. So instead of sitting in a classroom doing our sessions, I would take him out for a walk through the wood. And I said to him, oh my goodness, look at that tree. It's just built for climbing. He said, I've never climbed a tree. And I said, really? Thinking, oh, he's totally making this up. What do you mean? He's 10. He's a lad. How is he not? I remember climbing trees as a kid. And I said, what do you mean you've never climbed a tree? And he said, oh, no, I'm not allowed. And I said, oh, why? And he said, oh, that might hurt myself. Yeah, you probably will, mate. But do you know what? You can do it safely. And you can do it to a point where you are okay and you learn the risks and you learn the challenges and you learn from them and you get higher next time. And you know what? We spent the next few weeks climbing trees. And as he climbed higher and he sat there, I got some of the most... All I can explain is the biggest breakthrough I had with him was when he was climbing that tree. And the biggest breakthrough with the parents was because he'd climbed a tree. Because I was allowing him to risk. I was allowing him to challenge himself. And I was allowing him to work out what his next steps were by himself. So think about that when we are, with all the best intentions, stopping our kids from taking risks, is that they need to take risks because we're not around forever. The third piece of research I want to bring in is one that gives me hope. It comes from a field called Intergenerational Transmission of Trauma. It's to study how our own unprocessed experiences get passed down to the next generation. It's landmark work by one of our favourites, Dr. Dan Siegel and Mary Hazenzel, in their book Parenting from the Inside Out, which is something remarkable. Like, I love his work, and I love the people he works with. Often women, often really great in their field, making real impacts. It's not what happened to us in childhood that often deparents how we parent. It's whether we have made sense of what's happened to us. Parents who've had difficult childhood but has processed those experiences, who have developed what Sigal calls a coherent narrative about their own lives, parented just as securely as parents who had easy childhoods. The difficulty itself was not the problem. The unexamined difficulty was. Which means this: you have to do your own work. As a parent, get curious about your own story, making sense of the wounds that you may have grown up with. It's not just good for you, it's one of the most powerful things you can do for your child. As a therapist, we have to do our own work. We have to go to counselling. We are not allowed to work without sorting out our own crap. And it's vital. I see this all the time with parents who find it really difficult to advocate for their kids in school. And the reason I put this down to is quite often we have unresolved issues with school. So when we go into school, instead of going in as that parent to advocate for our child, we often go in as the student who was bullied, the student who had a teacher who told them they were no good. We go in there as a student instead of a fully grown parent. So how do we tie this to what Claire was feeling? Claire's anxiety was old. It had roots. And when she started to explore what was going on in her own sessions, everything began to shift. So, what can you do when you recognise yourself in your child's struggle? There are 5 things. For any parent who is given their own moment while listening to this, then I'm going to give you some top tips to really help with that. So 1, get curious, not guilty. Guilt is a closed door. Curiosity is an open one. If you recognise your own anxiety showing up in your child, the question is not what is wrong with me. It is what happened to me and how has that shaped the way I move through the world. That is the question worth sitting with, and ideally worth exploring with support. But you can sit with a journal. Sit with your phone and voice message yourself. Just explore what that looks like. I often do a timeline, and it's a really easy exercise, and I do this with 99% of my clients. I start what they know from their birth to significant memories to today. And you know what? You look at that and you can see some of the patterns, some of the things that shaped you. Have a look at them and work out what it is on that timeline that might be having an influence today on how you're walking through the world. And if you need to, go and get some help, get some support with it. It's really being curious about your own development and why you're here, why you behave in the way that you do is honestly life-changing. It's absolutely brilliant. So, number 2, regulate self first, always. You cannot co-regulate a child from a dysregulated state. This is the same whether you're a parent or a teacher. Before you try and calm a child, attend to yourself. Breathe, ground yourself. Notice your own body. What signals is it trying to give you? If they are melting down, it will not take you a few minutes. Those few minutes will make all the difference for that child. It's the most effective thing you can do. You know the old adage, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't offer a nervous system that you haven't first settled yourself. 3, watch your reassurance. This is counterintuitive, I know, and it's hard, But research consistently shows that excessive reassurance, telling an anxious child everything will be fine, removing every source of worry, actually increases anxiety over time. It tells the child's nervous system that the threat was real enough, and that instead of trying to reassure, try validating and then gently encouraging. So I can see you're worried, and worry is really uncomfortable, but I know you can handle this. That's very different from constantly reassuring. So, validate, then encourage. 4, do your own work, not because you're broken, but because you're human. Humans carry things. Get some support, whether it's therapy, coaching, simply a space to explore your own story. This is not a luxury. For a parent whose own wounds are showing up in their child, it is part of the treatment. 5, tell your child, age appropriately, that you're working on it too. This is powerful beyond measure. When a parent says to a child, I know I get anxious sometimes, but I'm getting help for that. It does several things simultaneously. It normalizes help seeking. It reduces the sense for the child that they are the problem. And it shows them that adults can be self-aware and acknowledge their own struggles. It's modelling, and it's perfect. It's one of the greatest gifts that you can give them. And I think often this works. I have had clients who have come to me as adults, and then a few years later, they've brought their child to me, or they've previously had therapy with somebody else, and they've said to their child, Ashley is just like my whoever, my Sarah, my David, whatever. And modelling that actually it's normal and it's helpful to get support is just amazing. So let's have a look. Let's go back to the story of Claire and Ellie. Claire started her own sessions, not instead of the work we were doing with Ellie, but alongside it, and we often wrap the child 360. We were holding Ellie in the therapy room, helping her build the emotional language and coping tools she needed. And we were holding Claire in a separate space. Now, somebody else took Claire while I had Ellie. We were helping her understand her own anxiety, where it had come from, and how it had been silently shaping some of the behaviour in their home. And what emerged over several months was a story Claire had never fully told. A childhood in a home where her own mother's anxiety had filled every room, where uncertainty was met with catastrophising, where the message, never spoken but always present, was that of a world that was threatening place, and the safest thing to do was stay small, stay vigilant, and stay home often. Claire had grown up, left home, built a career, had a fantastic relationship, and had a child. But she'd never gone back to examine any of it because it didn't seem relevant. Because she told herself she was fine, because she was the strong one. She wasn't like her mum. And then Ellie started having stomach aches on Monday morning, and suddenly it became relevant. The work was not dramatic, it was slow and careful, sometimes painful, but it was the most important work Claire had ever done, not just for herself, although that really changed her, but for Ellie. Because as Claire's own anxiety began to loosen the grip, the Sunday evenings in their home began to change. The quality of the silence changed. The way Claire held herself changed. And Ellie's nervous system, which had been faithfully reading her mum's state every week for 9 years, began gradually to settle. By the spring term, Ellie was back at school. Not without wobbles, but back. And one evening, out of nowhere, she said to Claire, You seem different lately, less worried. And Claire told us this in her next session. She said it with tears running down her face and the widest smile we'd seen in months. She noticed, she said, she actually noticed. Of course she did. Ellie had always been noticing. That was never the problem. The gift here was now there was something different to see. Let's have a look at the bigger picture here. There is a phrase I come back to again and again in this work, and it comes from the writer and psychiatrist Mark Woolen, who spent decades studying intergenerational trauma. He says the greatest gift you can give your child is to heal yourself. That lands differently depending on where you are in your own journey. And for some of you, it will feel relief, permission to prioritise your own healing as an act of love for your own child. For others, it might feel like pressure. One thing that you should be doing, like to add to that big list, one more way you might be getting it wrong. I want to be clear about which of those I intend. This is not about perfection. It's not about being healed, sorted, fully processed parent before you're allowed to show up for your child. That parent does not exist. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. Every single one of us carries something. Every single one of us has moments where our old stuff walks in the room ahead of us. What matters is not the wounds are gone. What matters is that we're curious about them, that we're willing to look, that we're doing the work imperfectly, inconsistently, humanly, alongside the children we love. What I will say to you as well is, even if you've gone through therapy, it often takes that top layer off and something else might appear a little while later down the line. Because, to use that old ad, it is a journey. It is something that we have to see and constantly work at. It's not a, job done. Be aware of that. But what I will say, you will not waste any time in therapy, like ever. If you've got a good therapist, you will always work on something decent, you will always feel better for it, and you will always come away lighter. Ellie did not need a perfect mother in Claire. She needed someone who was willing to ask, is this mine? If it is, then I need to do something about it. If you have ever heard yourself, or if you've heard anything that resonates in this episode, you've had your own, that might be me moment. I want to say something to you directly. You're not the reason your child is struggling. You are the reason they're going to be okay. Because you're here, you're listening, you're showing up for your child, even when they don't know about it, even if you're walking the dog right now or doing the cleaning while you're listening to this, you are showing up for your kids. You are the reason they're going to be okay. You're asking the questions that are hardest to ask. The fact maybe your anxiety is shown up in your child does not make you a bad parent in any way. It makes you a human one. Anxiety does not travel through families because parents don't love their children enough. It travels because love is enough to protect us from our own unexamined stories. Examination, curiosity, the willingness to sit with your own discomfort in a room with somebody you trust, or just a journal, that changes things. The research says so. Claire and Ellie are proof of it. You don't have to have it all figured out before you start. You just have a willingness to look. And if you're ready to look, we're here, or go and get some help. Always go on a recommend. Thank you for being here for this one. This is one of the most important conversations we have at The Resilient Kid, and I'm grateful you trusted us with it. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the parent who grew up without that emotional language and what it looks like to learn it for the first time alongside your child. That one is just as important, just as human Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Show notes, research reference, further reading are all below. And if anything in today's episode has stirred something for you, for yourself or for your child, please reach out. We're here. That's what we're here for. Until next time, please be kind to yourself. You're doing better than you know. Lots of love.